The Bad Mother is a strange and unsettling story about a woman who is extremely nasty to her children. This is another popular modern urban legend from Spain. The story of the Bad Mother which I am about to relate is not well known, but it is still real. If you have a heart of steel, iron nerves and the soul of a sumo wrestler, sit down, make yourself comfortable and listen to this story. But if they are weak-minded or fear cruelty and blood, then you must not listen to my tale. In a small town in Spain, many years ago, there was a woman named Rosa who lived in a hut. She raised 4 children with her husband, 2 sons and 2 daughters. Her eldest son was named Francisco. Javier was next, followed by Maria and the youngest, Lucia. Those who knew Rosa said that she was a nice woman, but after the death of her husband, she slowly began to go insane. Little by little, she began to treat her children worse and worse. The young boys and girls were terrified of her, because whenever they did even the slightest thing wrong, Rosa would fly into a rage and hit them so hard that their cries could be heard echoing throughout the house. The neighbors were aware that Rosa was a bad mother, but they had no way of knowing just how bad she could become. One night, the weather forecast on the radio predicted heavy hail, heavy snow and widespread thunderstorms. It was very cold and Rosa told her children to take the axes out of the woodshed because they were going into the forest to chop some firewood. The children knew that their mother would get angry if they didn't listen to her. Within minutes, they were waiting outside, armed with flashlights, bags and axes. They also brought some rotten meat with them in case they encountered a wild animal. Once they had reached the middle of the forest, Rose took her son Francisco aside. "Francis, you come with me," she said. "The rest of you cockroaches, look around for wood." Without another word, Francisco grabbed his bag and followed his mother. When they were out of sight of the other children, the mother turned to him and said, "Francisco, hold out your bag and stand perfectly still." He held out the bag and his mother walked behind him. "I hope you understand what I am about to do," she said. "Your father was the only one working, and without his income, we are lost. In our house, there is one too many mouths to feed and I am starving. Sorry, but at the same time, no regrets." With that, his mother picked up the axe and swung it at her son's head. It sliced cleanly through his neck and his severed head fell into the bag he was holding. Then Francisco's body collapsed in a heap on the snow, still clutching the bag. The mother used some snow to wash the blood off her axe and then ran back to her other children. "Francis was eaten by a bear," she said. "It's not safe out here. We better go home." The poor children had no idea what their mother had done. They cried all the way home, mourning the loss of their older brother. They were unaware of what fate had in store for them. At home, when the children were bathing and grooming themselves upstairs, Rosa called Javier and told him she needed help in the kitchen. Javier, always an obedient child, ran downstairs as fast as he could. "Make me some tea, you little cockroach," ordered Rosa. When the tea was ready, she growled, "Bring me the bottle that is sitting on the top shelf of the cupboard." The boy did as he was told. Rosa poured the contents of the bottle into the tea and then handed it to Javier and told him to drink it. Young Javier was not suspicious in the least. He took the cup his mother handed him and swallowed it in one gulp. He had no way of knowing that his evil mother had poisoned it with deadly cyanide. A minute later, Javier crawled upstairs and collapsed in front of his siblings. He was foaming at the mouth and rolling around on the ground. Lucia came running downstairs and cried, "Mommy is having a cardiac arrest." Rosa calmly walked up the stairs and found Javier lying motionless on the floor of the bedroom. His crying sisters were standing over him. The mother gave his corpse a kick and told the girls that their brother was dead. That night, Maria and Lucia cried themselves to sleep. Early the next morning, Rosa went into Maria's bedroom and woke her sleeping daughter. "No need to get up this morning," she whispered. "You don't have to do your chores today. Do you hear me, my pretty little cockroach?" Maria nodded as Rosa sat down on the corner of her bed and began to sing her a lullaby. It was a song she used to sing when Maria was just a baby. The young girl welcomed this tenderness from her mother and soon closed her eyes. Suddenly, Rosa took an ice pick out of her sleeve, and before Maria knew what was happening, she drove it into her daughter's chest, piercing her heart. Maria died almost instantly. A few hours later, Lucia woke up and went into her sister's bedroom. She was horrified to find the bed soaked in blood and Maria lying dead in the middle. Terrified, Lucia ran downstairs. "Mommy, Mommy!" she screamed. "A murderer broke into the house while we were sleeping and killed Mary." "I must confess one thing," said her mother, calmly. "My daughters and my sons, I have both loved and hated. I was the one who killed your brothers and your sister. I did it all. I chopped off Francisco's head. I poisoned Javier with cyanide. I pierced Mary's heart with an ice pick, and now, I will strangle you slowly, so that you suffer more than your siblings. I hate you, you cockroach." "No, Mother," cried Lucia. "Don't do it." But her crazed mother didn't listen, and soon Lucia too lay dead on the floor. Nobody knows what happened to Rosa. Perhaps she wandered out into the forest and died, or maybe she left town and changed her name. No trace was ever found of her. It is said that, today, the house in which they lived still stands, and it is haunted by the ghosts of the children who were killed there. Local people say that if you go out into the forest and say, "Francisco," 5 times, the ghost of a headless boy will appear behind you and chop off your head with an axe. The Twin Girls is a creepy urban legend that is very popular with children in Spain and other Spanish-speaking countries. There was a married couple who lived in a rural area of Spain. Their house was a modest little cottage, located on the edge of a busy main road. They had 2 daughters who were both twin girls. As they grew up, the twin girls were very well behaved. They never fought or argued. They lived happily together and hated to be separated. One day, the mother had to go to the shop and buy some milk and bread. She didn't want to leave the girls on their own, so she brought them with her. Grasping both girls by the hand, the mother led them across the busy road. Unfortunately, the mother had forgotten to look both ways before she crossed the street. Just as they neared the other side, she heard a loud screech and then a horrible crunching sound as her daughter's tiny hands were torn out of her grasp. When the mother twirled around to look, she screamed in horror at what she saw and collapsed on the sidewalk. The twin girls had been run over by a huge truck. The bloody remains of the twin girls were splattered across the road. The mother began crying and sobbing hysterically. Try as she might, she couldn't tear her eyes away from the 2 big streaks of red that stained the road. At the funeral, the father tried to comfort his wife, but she was inconsolable. Over and over, she screamed, "This is all my fault. This is all my fault." 4 years later, the mother and father still lived in the same house beside the road where their daughters had perished. The woman became pregnant again. The couple were surprised when the doctors told them that they would be having twins again. The parents rejoiced when their 2 little girls were born. This happy event caused the mother to forget the tragedy of the past. As the twin girls grew up, their mother and father were careful never to mention the previous children. They acted as if the deceased girls had never existed. One day, the 2 little twin girls were playing in the garden. Their mother came out and told them to come with her to the shop. As they stood at the edge of the road, the mother took hold of the hands of the 2 girls and held them tightly. Suddenly, as the mother began walking across the road, the girls began to struggle and tried to slip out of their mother's grasp. "No, Mommy, don't hold us," cried the twin girls in unison. "We don't want to die again." The Clown Mask is a creepy short story about a group of boys who are cleaning an old warehouse when they come across something strange hidden in an old wooden box. 3 teenage boys were looking for a summer job. They were hired by a company and given the task of cleaning out an old warehouse. While they were working, one of the boys found an old, red wooden box among the piles of rubbish. The teenagers gathered around the box, curious to see what was inside. When they opened it, they were disappointed. All they found inside the box was a clown mask. It was a grotesque mask with narrow, beady eyes, a bulbous red nose and a large, crooked mouth. One of the boys picked up the mask and put it on. He immediately began to laugh and jump up and down. The other two boys chuckled at the display and clapped their hands. They watched as he danced around the warehouse, flailing his arms around like a crazy person. His laughter echoed around the old, stone walls of the warehouse. He danced faster and faster, and finally the two boys didn't find it so funny anymore. The masked boy was jerking and twisting his body into absurd shapes. His friends began to get worried that there was something wrong with him. He kept falling over and banging his head against the ground, whereupon he would immediately spring to his feet and resume the crazy dance. The boy was clawing at the mask and laughing like a madman. It looked like he was having some kind of seizure. His friends ran after him, and when they grabbed him, he fell to the floor and stopped moving. They ripped off the mask, and when they saw his face, they were horrified. The boy's face was twisted in an expression of terrible pain. Blood was flowing from his eyes, nose and mouth. They immediately called an ambulance, but by the time it arrived, it was too late. The boy had died from his injuries. The Wheelchair is a scary story about a detective who investigates a murder in an old mansion. In 1984, there was an old lady who lived alone in a two-story mansion. The woman was paralyzed from the waist down and she was in a wheelchair. She was completely immobile and unable to care for herself. Ever since the death of her husband, she had a nurse who would visit her every day to help with various tasks. What made it even more difficult was the fact that the two floors of the house were only connected by an old staircase inside. When the old lady needed to move between the two, the nurse would have to pick her up and carry her frail body like an infant, up and down the stairs. One day the police received a frantic phone call from the old widow. There had been a murder. Since police units were scarce at the time, and the murderer had already fled the scene, only one detective was sent out to conduct the initial crime scene report. When the detective arrived, he found the nurse lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Her arms and legs were splayed out at odd angles and her throat had been ripped out. The old lady sat in her wheelchair at the top of the staircase watching him, still and silently, seemingly in shock. He could immediately rule her out as a suspect, due to her inability to move up and down the stairs, and because she was trapped up there the time the murder took place. It was similar to the death of her husband many years ago, who had suffocated in his sleep on the couch downstairs. The detective put on his gloves, took photos, swabbed for evidence, and covered the body until the coroner arrived later, all routine business. He searched every room downstairs, looking for clues, then asked the old lady if he could look upstairs. She insisted that she was upstairs the whole time and no one apart from her had been up there that day, but regardless of this the detective ascended the staircase, to which she hesitantly moved aside. Beyond the staircase, there was a narrow corridor, with 3 closed doors along it. He checked behind each of the doors: the empty bedroom, nothing; the bathroom, nothing. He became anxious as he slowly made his way to the final bedroom where the old lady slept. He opened it and everything looked normal. A bed, a wardrobe and a bedside table with a lamp. He checked every wall of the room in horror, as it was not what he discovered, but it was what he didn't discover that made him stop dead in his tracks and slowly reach for his gun in its holster. It was a detail so minor that they had completely overlooked it on the last investigation of the husband's death. There was no phone upstairs. The detective pulled out his gun and rushed down the corridor. When he came to the top of the stairs, all he found was an empty wheelchair. Thank you for watching and listening to this story. May God always protect and bless you.